Me, 32 female with my husband, 35 male of 10 years, he is divorcing me because I'm infertile. I'm a complete and utter wreck. Many consultations, an excessive amount of tests, 5 rounds of IVF, and months of sobbing myself to sleep were all part of the process. And then, all of a sudden, the one constant source of pleasure in my life is gone. For me, the last year has been really challenging. The death of my mother occurred in July, and it had been her wish to see me, her lone daughter, get pregnant, and I'm sorry that she didn't get to see that happen. Unfortunately, I was laid off in November, and the consequences have been compounding ever since. My husband and I are no longer able to afford another round of IVF. We are barely able to pay my doctor's visits. My husband and I have fantasized about a blissful existence that included 2 children, a dog, and a beautiful rural property. But reality was far from perfect. All of this came crumbling down only a few days ago. After a long day at work, I greeted him with a smile and approached him, expecting to be kissed. But he didn't even look my way and walked right by me. In response to my turning back around to inquire as to what was wrong, he made a somber face and motioned for me to sit down. As I sat, I could feel my heart sinking into my chest, but I couldn't put my finger on it. In the middle of the table, he placed a couple of pieces of paper and slid them towards me, burying his face in his hands and letting out a small. He was giving divorce papers to me, and I realized as I looked down at my feet, terrified. Everything that happens after that is a blur. When I was younger, he told me that he loved me and was sorry, but that he had been miserable and that he couldn't stay with me if I couldn't have a kid. It was he who revealed to me that he was the monster and that he was unable to break free from his biological drive. If we couldn't have children, we made the decision early on that we would not adopt because we wanted biological children. Please don't judge us for this decision. During the night, he used to hold my hand and promise me that he would never leave me, no matter what, that being childless was okay, and that I was worth it. I've come to realize that everything was a ruse. Anything's impossible for me to hold it against him, since I'm the one who was undermining the relationship and the one who was destroyed. The day before, his sister and best friend came over to help him pack his possessions, and I couldn't stop crying the whole time. He's moved into an apartment on the other side of town and has agreed to pay the mortgage on our home for the next 4 months at least, until I can find another work and we can sell our property. I'm in a state of shock. Since the night he left, I haven't gotten out of bed. I'm not sure why. I haven't had anything to eat in a long time. I have the impression that I have already passed away. What should I do on Reddit, exactly? I haven't had the courage to tell any of my friends or family members about my infertility yet, since I am already embarrassed about being infertile in front of them. What was he thinking when he did this to me? My existence has come to an end. Update. First and foremost, I'd want to get a few things off my chest about the messages I've received in regards to my current situation. Thank you so much to everyone who has helped me and has been kind and sympathetic during this process. I really appreciate it. I got a number of encouraging messages and random acts of kindness. After stating my position, I got a torrent of private messages from folks telling me that I deserved everything that had happened to me because I refused to adopt, that I deserved a life of loneliness, and that I should dedicate myself to the adoption process. That was horrific and made me want to commit suicide. For the record, I do not consider myself to be a nasty person just because I do not want to adopt a child. I do not feel it is unethical to give preference to biological children over adopted children. Since the vast majority of individuals do not adopt, it is obvious that 95% of the world feels the same way as you do. In my opinion, it takes a courageous and caring person to adopt a child who is not their biological child. I am not one of those folks, and I apologize if this offends you in any way. Now for the most recent information. After publishing my essay, I met with a lawyer who agreed to take me on as a client the next day. On Thursday, I met with my attorney to discuss my expectations for the divorce process going forward. On Friday, I also had an appointment with a psychotherapist. For the time being, she suggested me to spend some time by myself rather than communicating with my partner. Over the course of a few days, I contemplated his leaving and the broader context of our situation, and came to the conclusion that, although I was upset at how he handled the matter, I could understand his wish to leave. If I am unable to provide a child for him, and that is really what he wants, he will be forced to leave. By Friday, I was in a more positive frame of mind, despite the fact that everything was still numb. In my mind's eye, I could picture him shoving the papers in my direction, and then saying how much he loved me but couldn't be with me. It's still not genuine, to be honest. On Saturday afternoon, everything started tumbling down all over again. When the doorbell rang, I was in the middle of a Netflix binge-watching session, seeking to clear my thoughts of everything. The clenching of my heart occurred as I walked towards the door and opened it for my husband. He had an awful appearance, almost as bad as I did. His request to enter inside the room without looking me in the eyes was met with silence from me, and I couldn't say anything. I positioned my body on the other side of the doorway and let him in, keeping myself from kissing him and punching him at the same time. At this moment required all I had. We sat on the couch in silence for what seemed like 10 minutes. We were both exhausted. As soon as he managed to say anything, he mumbled, "Infertile old maid, I'm terribly sorry." I stayed deafeningly silent. Eventually, I had the courage to ask, "Is that all you wanted to say?" After another 2 minutes of silence, the way he shook his head and began crying caused me to shed a tear as well. He groaned and buried his face in his hands for the second time. He admitted to me that he had been feeling bad about missing out on being a father. I told him that I understood and that I didn't blame him for having children, but he cut me off in the middle of my statement. Upon further inquiry, he told me that was not the case. He admitted to me that he'd been seeing a young girl at work for the past 6 months and that he couldn't continue to deceive me anymore. They had a strong emotional and physical bond, and she had been pleading with him to leave me for months at this point. He said that his anxieties about his lack of a family led him to assume that he needed to change and that marrying her was a grave error on his part. My body couldn't take it any longer at this point. I told him he needed to leave my house immediately. The way he looked at me made me think he was a scared dog, and he panickedly told me he wanted another chance, that he'd just broken up with his colleague, and that he was willing to postpone having children in order to be with me. I didn't know what to do, so I started yelling at him, telling him to go and that I was over with him. He just burst into tears and begged me to take a deep breath and relax, because it was clear that he was not going to leave. I went ahead and did it. I snatched my keys from my pocket and ran out the door. I drove out of town for 30 minutes before pulling over on the side of a desolate road and sobbing for an hour and a half. The next morning, when I returned to town, I checked my phone and saw that my husband had called and texted me more than 20 times with messages like, "I'm so sorry, she's nothing," and other such platitudes like, "I'm sorry, she's nothing, blah blah blah." I didn't delete any of these messages since I was aware that they were critical for my lawyer to be able to see them. When I returned to my place of living, he was no longer in attendance. He hadn't stolen anything or caused any damage, so I was relieved to see everything in the same condition as when I first entered. I regained my composure and sense of reality and dialed my lawyer's phone, leaving him a detailed voicemail about the events of the previous hour. My lawyer phoned me back today and told me to report to the office first thing in the morning on Tuesday, since sending me a text message on Sunday in which he said, "I'll get back to you. My husband has not tried to contact me, infertile old maid. You have my heartfelt admiration. I made a mistake, and I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience this has caused you. I'll be available for you whenever you want my assistance. My thoughts are whirling about in my head once again, and I feel as if I'm about to die. I have not yet informed any of my friends or family members of what has occurred, and I doubt that I will be able to do so in the near future."